So again, everyone that's already here that has joined the webinar, thank you so much for taking the time. Now, Ben, you've had an extraordinary journey. I mean, you have a wonderful curriculum vitae that, so you we're talking about, leading HR strategists across industries like, hospitality, retail, technology, and building award-winning cultures along the way in all of the places that you have been. So to kick things off, can you share perhaps a pivotal moment or experience in your career that shaped your vision for what makes a high performance company culture? How did it influence the way you approach leadership and values today?
Well, I mean, I think first of all, not every single company I've worked with, was a successful experience in a way, because you may have a compelling vision and the right views about leadership and about building the right culture, but you rely on the C-suite members, the chief executive and the executive team, and then all the leaders in the business to buy into it. And especially early in my career, I was a lot less experienced. My influencing skills were perhaps not as well honed as they became later on in my career. So, along the way, it hasn't been just a long line of success. There have been a few, mistakes, a few failures. You learn from those, of course, but I don't want to sort of, the audience to think that every single thing I've ever done has been successful, because it's not like that. Although, however, the last 15 years of my career I spent with Hilton, and it's been an absolutely wonderful journey and a wonderful thing to have, in my wildest dreams, I couldn't have imagined ending my executive career with the very best company I've ever worked for. And to go back to your question, I think, the sort of the recipe, if you will, for being able to build such a culture comes from starting with the right leader at the very top, with the right vision, the ability to articulate that vision, to communicate it, to get everyone engaged around it, and then sort of absolute focus on action through leadership behaviors, through lots of different types of programs, through constant reinforcement, and keeping it alive. In the case of Hilton, for example, when Hilton initially, sort of the new Hilton was created out of Blackstone purchasing both components of Hilton at the time, which was Hilton Corporation of America and Hilton International, merging it into one entity, creating the Hilton worldwide we know today. At the very beginning, it was very difficult, and I joined shortly after that period. It was very difficult to merge two companies, same name, but very different. At that time, they were separate, but same name and very different culture, one US-based, one UK-based and very international, and lots of things to fix. But at the very beginning, Chris Niseta, the chief executive, was determined to weave everything together through, first of all, let's articulate what we want to try and achieve. Let's build a strategy and let's communicate it, and let's be very clear and mindful and thoughtful, but very clear about what we want to try and achieve. And then let's talk about the culture and the behavior we want our leaders to exhibit. And the starting point was to determine what our values were going to be. And being an American company, that acronyms are important. So Hilton, HILTON, became the 6 values. Hospitality, ownership, integrity, and so on and so forth. But around that, we started to build. So that was then the work of HR, a series of communication and training programs, clear definition of what those values looked like in action. So it's not just a word like hospitality or teamwork or leadership. It's what does it mean? What does it look like? How do I know when I see it done well? And so, that was the beginning. Strategy, mission, vision, mission, values, and then implementing the style with which we wanted to go about leading this business. And I think, I don't know whether that sounds simple or complicated. To me, it was very clear and very simple. and everyone knew what they had to do. And the most important component of all this was to ensure that our leaders were clear what was expected of them in terms of how we wanted them to lead. Because at the end of the day, you could have the most wonderful programs, you could have the most wonderful facilities, you could have great recruitment and talent acquisition strategies, you could work really hard on retaining your top talent, all these things. But if your leaders don't deliver what they're supposed to deliver in terms of people-centric leadership, focus on culture, then it's very difficult to succeed. Anyway, I'm waffling a little bit now, but that's I don't know whether I'm answering your question, but I mean, to me, that was the best example I've ever seen. I was, very much part of it as the head of HR for Europe, Middle East, Africa. I sat on the global HR board, and I was able to participate, influence, work with the team, and do my bit, as part of the journey.
No, it absolutely answers the question, and also thank you so much for sharing that component and your journey in that much detail as well. Now, there's something that I caught briefly. You had mentioned selecting leaders or choosing the correct leader based on how you want them to lead. I'm curious what you mean by that. What kinds of leadership are there? Are there different methods? In your experience, which one is more pleasant, which one is more desirable when you are selecting, or what you mean and when you say selecting the correct leader?
And I think HR people like to think that there's a lot of science around how you recruit and how you select. And there is a little bit of science, obviously the usage of psychometrics. Today we have artificial intelligence enhancing all our recruitment and talent acquisition processes. But actually, there isn't such thing as an exact science when it comes to assessing somebody's fit to an organization, because I've met many people in my career who honed the art of interviewing extremely well. They were extremely well prepared. They might even have been well rehearsed. And it's quite difficult to kind of work your way through that to get to the real person. And so sometimes you get, but they used to say, you make your decision in the first minute and you spend the next 59 minutes either dispelling or reinforcing your impression. But some of that is probably a little bit true, because you could immediately fall for somebody and think, wow, they're amazing. And unfortunately, I've seen some people that were amazing at interview and didn't actually quite work out in the workplace. And then equally, I met people who didn't do quite so well at interview, but actually, when they were recruited, did a really great job. And the difference is, I think, you have to keep the ability to learn and be humble about it all. So if you come from the perspective that I know everything, I'm the best at my job, look at my CV, it's wonderful. I don't think it's likely you're going to be very successful. But if you come at it with, well, I've had a great career, but I'm new here, it's a new company, new business, and I know nothing, so I'm going to rely on you guys to teach me along the way and hold my hand and help me, I think you achieve much more. The other component, though, is, and that's quite difficult to determine, if you will, at interview stage or at selection stage, is great leaders invariably, 99% of those I've ever met really actually like people, and they like to see people succeed, and they're interested in people, and it comes in many sort of flavors, if you will. But at the core of it is leaders are at their best and at their most effective when they can demonstrate that they are interested in people as human beings, not just as employees, and that they get a lot of satisfaction and a lot of joy from seeing them succeed. Those leaders, in my experience, tend to be the best leaders and the most successful leaders. And we had a great example in our company as our chief executive, Chris Neseta, and I don't want it to sound like it's a personality cult or anything like that, because he'd be horrified if he heard me say that. He sees himself as just a regular guy. So there's nothing that regular about him. Of course, he's an amazingly talented chief executive, but he was always extremely humble and extremely interested and extremely caring of people. And this wasn't an act, it wasn't fake. He would go into a hotel and he wanted immediately to go and speak to the team members, not the leaders, but the team members, the housekeepers, the cooks, the cleaners, the public area cleaners, the guys that did the most difficult job for the least money. He wanted to go and spend time with them. And they knew he meant it, because you can't fake that, or you can't fake it for very long. They knew he meant it, and he was really interested in them and in hearing their story. And there's I think a core aspect of great leadership. In my coaching work today, I try to engage people in the notion that it's very difficult to be the best leader you can be if you don't really care for people. If you see people as a nuisance or a hindrance, and you need them, of course, to do their jobs, but you're not that interested in them. You're not interested in what they do outside, or what problems they may face in their life outside work, and challenges they may have with their families or communities or finances or whatever. If you're not really interested in that, you can't connect completely with your people and get the best out of them. And I have a very fundamental belief about that.
First of all, I love the way that you phrase this. I absolutely agree with you. I mean, in my experience as well, the leaders that I have had the pleasure to work with, or the best leaders that I've had the pleasure to work with, have been the ones that appreciate every single member of the team genuinely and truly.
Yeah.
And the ones that demonstrate genuine humility, not just modesty, but genuine, honest humility, have been the ones that I have developed the most respect for. And definitely, I'm not going to be the only one to say this. I mean, naturally, I'm sure so many people share it. What you have mentioned on multiple occasions while answering this question was the word humility. And that's something that I want to dive in a little bit more in depth, because I'm curious to know your opinion. How does true humility manifest in leaders? And do you think that it is an inherent quality or a learned quality?
That's a probably difficult question. The second part of your question is probably difficult to answer as to whether it's inherent or learned, because I don't know. I mean, you can sort of mirror behaviors and describe what humility looks like in action to people and hope that they get inspired by your definition of it and may want to sort of try it on, try it if they're not naturally humble. But I think it's more inherent, quite frankly. I think it's in your head. It's how you see the world. It's even if you're very talented and very experienced and at the top of your profession, it's never thinking that you know everything. And I think in practice, to me, this is what it looks like. If you're a leader of a team and you engage with your team in problem solving, or in strategizing, or in coming up with new programs, so whatever it is that you and your team decide that you want to achieve, it is listening to your team's ideas with a completely open mind, in the knowledge that often, and more often than is comfortable for the leader, better ideas will come from the team. And if you can create that environment, and the demonstration, of course, is that many ideas get implemented that come from the team, ahead of those you might have had yourself. If you could do that, I think you could have a great business. Great chief executives know that. They know that they don't have it all in their head. They don't have all the answers. And if they listen, but truly listen with intent, listen with humility to the idea. And first, you have, of course, to create the environment where it's safe for everybody to express themselves freely and openly and safely. But if you have that, and if you can demonstrate to your team that you're properly listening, and some of their ideas are wonderful ideas and will get implemented, I think that that's the holy grail of outstanding people-centric leadership, and ultimately probably the holy grail of optimizing your business potential.
Definitely. I'm curious to know also, I mean, And I'm sure that the audience would be interested in understanding this key difference as well, right? We have managers and then we have leaders. So let's start first. If you could differentiate what you believe to be different between the key difference between a manager and a leader.
Well, again, a pretty difficult question because, managers are leaders too and should be leaders. Um, but, I think managers, in what you mean in the definition is that, the job is more about managing people and tasks in an orderly, process-oriented fashion and so on and so forth, whereas leadership is also much more about doing that when that's the requirement. But you do that through inspiring people. You do that to creating an environment that's fun, that's where people learn, where people grow. You do that where you share problems together, where you problem solve together. You do that where the leader takes part in some of the work. You lead by example, and also you do sometimes the hardest task, as the leader, because not because you're the only one that can do it, but because it's unpleasant, and you want to show that you can be up there doing it with your team. So I'd like to think that managers are leaders, and I would want all my managers to be leaders of their people. And everything I've described doesn't just apply to the chief executive; it applies to a team supervisor of 3 people in a coffee shop. You could do that. I mean, that's how I started my career, and my thoughts about leadership were quite basic, but they were my thoughts. I always thought, you know, I wouldn't want to ask anyone to do something I wasn't prepared to do. But mostly, I'll tell you just a little story, but it tells you, and this didn't come from reading a leadership book at that point, because many years later I read many leadership books and learned lots of stuff from gurus of leadership or other leaders that wrote about their experiences. But ultimately, you develop your own view and your own stuff. But when I first started as a leader, and I was in service, I was a head waiter in a restaurant, and I used to think, how am I going to get these people to do the job the way I want it to be done with the customers? And I had a very clear view that during the shift, during the time the restaurant was open, we had to be at our best. And I said to my team, very inexperienced as I was, I said, look, I'm here, I'm your leader, all right? Some of you may not agree with me being a leader because a few months ago we were colleagues, but I've been designated the leader. And this is what I'm going to do. First of all, if you have any problem, if you feel unwell, if you're uncomfortable about anything, we'll talk about it before the shift. And we'll talk about it again after the shift if we need to. But during the shift, we concentrate 100% on customers, and we do a fantastic job. Outside of that, I'll be there to help you, whatever your problem is. And it seems to have been it's evolved obviously over the years, but it's kind of the philosophy I had at the beginning, and it served me well because that's always what I've tried to do, and I'm not putting myself forward as an outstanding leader. I'm just saying I had this profound view and profound philosophy about simple things to show the team members working with me that I cared about them. I just didn't want to deal with all our problems during the time we serve the customers. But I was available before and I was available after. And, the rest was my history.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. It's an absolutely wonderful story. I believe personally, I'm of the belief that everyone should have some form of a customer service job or just experience dealing with customers directly because you learn a lot. You learn so much in terms of working in a high intensity and high pressure environment, and also dealing directly with customers. You always have to think on your feet a lot. So on that note, I'm interested also to know how do you think leaders can genuinely prioritize the well-being of and the comfort of their team while also keeping in mind, like, without compromising the performance goals?
Well, there's only one way to do this, is not to dissociate the two. I think if you think about them in isolation, you think, okay, we're going to have these, well-being programs or wellness programs, physical, mental wellness. We're going to do all these things, but let's keep an eye on, generating revenues and making profits and looking after our customers, and that's the predominant sort of rationale for us being here. I think, if you do that in this sort of compartmentalized way, I don't think it works. I think everything has to weave into an environment you create where team members feel that they are cared for, that they're important, that they're well thought of by the organization, that the organization genuinely cares for their well-being in a broad, not just when they come to work and in between the work hours, but 24/7. And I think the great companies, and I was lucky to work for Hilton, and I would consider Hilton one of the greatest companies, attach a huge amount of meaning and effort to that. So it's showing our team members that we really, really care for them, and whatever their travails are outside of work are important to us. We want to know about them, and we want to see whether we can help assuage or diminish the burden that they may experience outside of work, so that they can be at their best when they come to work. And that applies to their health, physical and mental. And if you could do that in a meaningful, authentic way, then that's part of building a great culture. When team members enjoy coming to work for the company because they know they are respected and liked as human beings as well as employees.
I've also noticed there's a go ahead.
I was going to say, and at Hilton, we were lucky to be able to invest in lots of different types of quite creative programs to support employees outside of work, so that they could be, their burden could be lessened and their health could be improved, so that they can be at their best when they come to work.
Definitely, absolutely agreed. I mean, that it's extremely essential and beneficial to demonstrate this level of alignment and care for your employees. Actually, I've been reading into some research recently that shows that people, especially higher ranking people in high ranking positions, prioritize value alignment over just simple salary, because in this value alignment, in this feeling of understanding, people also draw motivation. Do you agree with this notion
But
and the
I completely agree, and just with a slight caveat that you also have to be competitive on pay and general compensation and reward conditions, because the market will determine that if you're not competitive, even if you're seen to be the best company to work for, there'll be something missing. You need to be competitive. You don't have to be the best payer. You don't have to be the most generous payer, but you have to be competitive. And I'm saying that for all positions, from your service delivery people all the way up to your senior leaders. Then once you're in the ballpark, once you're in market at a competitive level, you can enhance the value proposition through what you do, through the culture, the programs you run for your people, for your team members, and the quality of leadership you deliver, and the career growth you deliver invariably. All of that makes a whole, which then becomes very compelling. But I agree with the research you read. It's very rarely just about salary, and if it's only about compensation, then it's not you don't always get the best people, and they don't always stay very long. It's got to be a bit, not just head, but also a lot of heart.
Definitely, absolutely agreed. And of course, naturally, by showing care for what matters to your employees outside of work, right? You cover the base of alignment and you cover the base of individual care. But other than that, there's also the aspect of inside, inter work feedback and into work, like inside of the job experiences that many good leaders and managers alike would want insight into. And they get insight into employees' experience with work with the use of feedback. Are there any specific strategies or tools that you found effective in giving the employees the ability to provide honest feedback and making them feel safe to provide such feedback?
Well, I mean, again, we've been doing employee surveys or sort of, lots of different names for that, but essentially employee surveys regularly in most of the companies I've worked with for probably 30 plus years. And I remember thinking in previous companies I worked for that, if we could get more than half of our people giving us feedback, that would be great. So I worked for companies where 65% of your team members or 63% of your team members get the yearly feedback. And at that time, I thought, gosh, that's great. Okay, it would be nice to be higher, but, we have 2/3 of the team members interested enough to spend half an hour, giving us their feedback. But actually at Hilton, some crazy number, between 95% and 99% of our team members responded to the survey, because over time, we were sort of the two critical things. Clearly, it has to be safe, it has to be confidential. In certain cultures, people rely on their jobs enormously for survival, so giving critical feedback about their leaders or their work environment may be seen to be dangerous, and so we had to demonstrate that, look, these are the rules of the survey. It's conducted by a third-party company. It's completely confidential. We never report on individual team members' feedback. It's going to be a group of 10 people minimum, and so on and so forth. And over time, it took perhaps a little time, we got unbelievably useful results every year from this survey. Remember, 200,000 team members responding to these surveys, a lot of data to trawl through. So that was one. We created this safe environment for people to feedback on lots of different topics, including the hard ones, paying conditions and training and all these things. And then there's the second part is, what do you do with the information? And critical, in my opinion, is first of all, to communicate the survey results, sort of high level, to everyone at all reporting units level, and to set improvement goals. So if the survey results were poor in a particular area, we would have an action plan about improving it. But globally, at the sort of the highest level, it was to pick the top 4 or 5 topics and go deep on those topics and respond to them. So if it was an issue about safety, safe environment at work, and I don't just mean health and safety, but I mean just safe generally from a leadership and ability to express yourself kind of environment, then we would have to address it. If there was an issue around diversity, equity, and inclusion, then we would have to address it. If there was an issue on benefits, generally medical benefits in particular, we would plan to address it. And every year we had 3 or 4 or 5 themes that we worked on to improve in direct response to the feedback. And I think that's why then people believe, you get action as a result of the feedback. So I'm going to give you my honest opinion, and I'll be thoughtful about it, but I'm going to give you my honest opinion. And I think that's the strength of getting your team members to give you information that you could then use to make your company a better company. And all that leads, by the way, to a better business, to better business results. In fact, our chief executives, when he does his quarterly reports, or certainly for the first few years of reporting, would always talk about people in his, and his audience were hard-nosed, Wall Street analysts and investors and so on. And he would say, the success of Hilton is all about building culture and building people. That's what brings us success. But of course, we open new hotels, we invest, we improve our business, we do lots of different things, and we're creative about that. But it's really about having the right people in the organization around the right cultural umbrella. I'm sorry if I'm waffling a little bit, but
Not at all. Not at all. Please, it's extremely interesting to hear you describe such a high performance culture as the one that you have experienced, especially at Hilton. Now, something that I'm very keen to hear is sort of the other side of the coin. To understand better, what obstacles do you think, have you encountered? at Hilton, and what obstacles do you think businesses more generally encounter when attempting to create such a high performance culture? And how do you think they can get past these challenges?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I mean, there are things that set you back a little bit. We've had a financial crisis in the time I was there. We then had COVID. There's factors that uh, might set you back in your investment planning towards creating a great work environment. But at the end of the day, though, if you keep your true north towards people, leadership, and culture, and even in difficult times when you have to make difficult decisions about letting people go and so on, how you go about that and how you do it is a sign of the type of organization you are. And I think we were able to manage through those difficult times, still keeping an eye on our people, still doing the right thing by our people, and being as thoughtful and humane and sympathetic and empathetic as we could be. Um, I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's if you spend some time um, putting some definition around the culture you want to build around those values, they have to be meaningful beyond the words. They have to mean something almost. I'm not going to say religious because that would go into a different sort of arena. But we have to live by those values, and we only had six. So, I mean, they were very broad, of course, but we only had six main values, and everyone understood them, and everybody was able to. I mean, it used to fascinate me when I visited hotels, and I would go into housekeeping or speak to people in the kitchen and ask them about the values, and they would all know them, and ask them about what they meant to them, and they would give me their version or their perspective of it, and then ask them to, did they know our vision and our mission, and did they know a little bit about our strategy? And they all did, because our process was to describe the strategy internally and take it down to every single job in the organization. You needed to know what your contribution was going to be, even if your job was to cook food or clean floors or whatever it was. We wanted you to know that you made a contribution to the success of the company, and we wanted you to be able to articulate it. And most people, the vast majority of people, were able to do that. Which always absolutely astounded me and gave me a really warm feeling.
It's such a wonderful thing to have such strong alignment between, well, everyone on the team, right? Regardless of roles, regardless of positions. Now, there's two questions that I have here, but I want to start with the first one, since you yourself have mentioned the six values that everyone upheld at Hilton. Now, if I remember correctly, it's hospitality, integrity, leadership, teamwork, ownership, and now. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Yes.
I'd love to know a little bit more about the latter, because I find that absolutely fascinating. What is the value of now?
Well, the value of now is that we act with energy and focus, and we don't dilly-dally, and we don't spend, weeks and months and years sort of cogitating and debating. We do stuff now. We display this sense of real sort of action orientation. If there's a problem, you fix it now. If there's particularly with customers, you don't let it linger. If there's a problem between team members, you fix it now. If there's a leadership issue, you fix it now. You don't let bad stuff linger, almost like a cancer in the organization. You address it straight away. That, by the way, that's not a metaphor I would have used when I worked for Hilton, but it's just to explain this focus on the now. We act quickly, and the world, and in the world of big business, you have to be quick and nimble and action oriented. You can't spend too long cogitating on things.
Definitely. Now, one unique thing that I notice about this list of, well, great and very interesting values is it's very short, right? It's one word. It's six words that have significantly deeper meaning. I want to know how important do you think it is that these words are easy to remember, or perhaps they're, simple to keep in mind? And if you think that this is perhaps a trick that other
Yeah,
companies
I mean, I think you
do.
need to remember clearly when you use your company's name as an acronym, as a memory jogger, HILTON, that helps, to remember for most people. I think the second thing is that's not all you don't just say to people, well, no, we are Hilton, here are our values. They coincide with the initials for Hilton, but this is what they look like, and then you have a paragraph that describes it. And you might every year when we go on the road to talk about our purpose platform, we kind of talk about evolution, how the definitions around those words have evolved. And what does integrity mean today compared to what it meant 15 years ago? I mean, fundamentally, it means the same things, but the challenges around integrity, the rules of governance, and I'm not talking just sort of public company governance. I'm talking about the environment. I'm talking about the world at large. So everything has evolved, and so you go and explain and engage with your team members in a two-way process to discuss our purpose platform. All the definitions evolve with time and take different dimensions. And that's important in keeping the culture alive. I mean, some people might say, well, why didn't you change your values? Why, that would also be evolution. But I think if the values are strong and if they're meaningful to people and people up and down the organization, and if they can see them in action, or as the case may be from time to time, not, breaches of those values, which they can challenge, and which we do challenge, in human resources quite strongly, then it's helpful to continue making the business better and to continue making the company ever better.
I love the way that you have phrased that. A caveat that, well, a challenge that I have noticed in my previous workplaces, and I see and I hear also a lot of managers struggle with, is sometimes these values are, they make beautiful posters, right? They make great acronyms. They, you might come up with the best words, perhaps, that are very deep and easy to remember, but also have deep meanings and really take a lot of connecting with to truly understand. But they struggle with translating this into actions, translating it into something tangible, into it, and integrating it tangibly again into and within the company. How would you advise that, say, an aspiring executive solve a problem like this?
I mean, quite frankly, I think if you have, anything around your strategy, sort of vision, mission, values, purpose, platform, whatever you call all these things, if they don't translate into some form of action or some form of behavior, they're meaningless. They're just words, as you say. They're just words, on a brochure or a website. They're completely meaningless. What makes them important isn't the word themselves, or isn't that they're, in the case of Hilton, they link nicely to the acronym, to the 6 letters in the name Hilton. It's actually what does it mean for the definition of the wanted leadership style in your company? What does it mean for how managers and leaders up and down the organization, not just the C-suite, but every single leader in the organization behave towards team members? How does it mean for how team members behave with each other and how they handle disagreement and how they handle conflict? What does it mean in how the company faces up to the communities it serves and what we do for, ESG, environment, social governance, and so on all that work? So it's the judgment isn't, are those words the right words, or they were written 15 years ago, are they still valid? They're always valid because the definitions and how they sort of translate into the workplace evolve with time, and as they should, and they have to be relevant and they have to be fresh every year, and that's how you build great companies, and that's how you build great company cultures, by keeping everything sort of fresh, novel, questioning yourself all the time, questioning whether we could do something better or something different, listening to your team members up and down the organization and how they feel about it all. There is strength in constancy. I always think great leaders also display constancy of purpose. That doesn't mean to say they're change averse. Absolutely not. But the core of what you want to try and achieve has to be recognized through the years. And I used to take great strength from the fact that we had 4 pillars of our strategy, our business strategy at Hilton. They never changed. Of course, the content under each one was reviewed every year and changed every year because the company was getting much bigger and new brands were coming and all that sort of stuff. But how we looked at business strategy never wavered. Towards the constituents, communities, customers, owners of hotels, and team members, never wavered. And that's also an important dynamic in building a great company and great culture. If you sort of seesaw all the time and change with the wind, and people are confused, they don't really know what's going on, they can't really sort of marry action and plans to the values and the strategy. It's very unhelpful. But if you can maintain this constancy of purpose, you have a better chance of building a great company and a great culture.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely agree. I mean, leaders set the tone for the culture, right? And keeping these values consistent and keeping this tone consistent is a huge strength, both for the individual leader as well as for the company as a whole. Now, before I go to the last 2 questions that I have, I want to remind the audience that if they have any questions, we will have a couple minutes at the end of the webinar to address these questions. So please do write them in the chat if any come up. Now, to get back on track while I'm here still, I wanted to ask a very huge idea that you mentioned previously is establishing a persona or establishing an idea in the first minute and then spending the rest during an I mean, of course, you use this in an interview, but I think that it can extend a little further, right? This could potentially extend all the way up to company as well, right? Setting the expectation, setting purpose, and setting the intention in the first minute of joining the company, or perhaps it's the first day. The time frame is less important, and then spending the rest of this time, defending this position and defending this. How would you extend this same analogy to a company, and then also how would you go about creating this sense of purpose and maintaining this sense of purpose throughout your experience in a company?
Well, I think in HR we spend a lot of time working on this notion, of how you welcome people into an organization, this sort of orientation, induction, onboarding, all these words that essentially mean the same thing. I think this first impression in the company is absolutely critical, and in fact, in companies that employ lots of people, there's quite a lot of churn, quite a lot of turnover in the first few months, predominantly attributable to the fact that the onboarding was not done very well. If you don't give an experience that reflects the company you are, the culture you espouse, the leadership style you sort of sing the praise of, from the very first minute a person joins the organization, I think there's a failure point right there, and then it's very difficult to regain that positivity if you've had a really terrible experience on day one. So not that we did it well everywhere at Hilton, I have to say, because we suffered also from attrition and churn in a world where everybody's running around, when you have staff shortages and you have busy hotels, and it's not an excuse, by the way, but we were always chasing our tail a little bit, and so we didn't always do it very well, and we paid a high price for that. And the high price you pay is you lose really good talent often. You lose people that you regret losing, that go on and do great things elsewhere, only because you didn't pay attention in that welcome first day, first week, first month. And so there's no easy answer, and I'm sympathetic to the pressures that sometimes can make it difficult to deliver that experience. But actually, if you can deliver that experience, and today we have lots of tools available to help us enhance the experience, lots of technology, lots of interesting sort of content that can be made available to people even before they join the organization. If the leaders actually pay a little bit of attention to that, actually it makes a big difference. Some of our hotels, the general manager organizes a welcome personally, of all new starters on a Monday morning or Monday afternoon, and spends time with them, sharing their views and their hopes and their desires, and getting people to buy into a vision for what their job is going to contribute to the hotel. And those tend to be more successful. Where we don't invest sufficient time as leaders, then we pay a price. So there's no easy answer to that. I mean, most companies, or the majority of companies, spend a lot of money recruiting people, and clearly they want to keep them. If you recruit them, you don't want to recruit them and then lose them quickly, and you spent money recruiting them and time and effort. You want to return on that investment through keeping people in the business, growing and contributing and helping you build a great business. So there's a certain tension there that ought to be resolved a little bit more easily. But this is the bane of most HR leaders and HR workers. How do we keep our people? So yes, I would agree with you, Malana. The induction orientation into an organization is absolutely critical. Companies that do it well reap the rewards, and companies that don't do it so well pay a price.
I definitely agree. I mean, again, it's wonderful to hear you share your experience and your actual tangible experience with the notions that we are covering. Now, as we approach the end of our webinar, there's one perhaps slightly unfair question, because you've already spent, almost 45 minutes or so actually talking in depth and sharing in depth about everything that you've seen work and not work. But as a summary question, I still would like to ask, what guidance would you provide to up and coming executives who wish to establish and maintain a high performance, value driven culture?
Well, I think the first thing I would say, the first question I would ask an executive is, how do you feel about people? People around you, people that work on your team. Tell me about how you view them. And I just want to sort of put across this notion that investing in people, and I don't mean investing cash necessarily, because it's even more important to invest a bit of time in people, and to show that you're interested and that you care, is extraordinarily powerful. And I always engage people who are skeptical to try it. Try to get to know your people by their first name, and try to get to know something about them that's personal. Do they have children? Do they have a partner? Do they have dogs, cats? Well, they have parents they may be caring for. A few little things about them that may put some definition around them as a human being, not just an employee. And ask questions around that and see what that gets you. And it's extraordinarily powerful, because what it gets them is people then are more engaged in the workplace, because they feel listened to, they feel cared for, they feel that their boss has an interest in them. And so they pay back, they give more to their work than they would have otherwise. And those that are willing to go on this little experimental journey can't believe it, and clearly you have to have the heart for it. There are leaders who simply feel that they don't have time, that it's below them to do stuff like that, and those leaders will also pay a price, in my opinion. And I've seen it through, nearly 50 years of work. It's not complicated, but I recognize that not everybody is wired in the way that they can do that easily. Because everybody's under pressure, everybody's running around, there's deadlines to achieve, there's blah, 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 blah. There's lots of reasons why you can't spend a bit of time with your team. But if you can, and if you did, you'd be amazed with the results.
Such a wonderful example of this humanistic approach, where a small push or a small change, right, just simply understanding someone on a personal and individual level could actually lead to such big motivational and cultural changes down the line. So any aspiring executive in the audience, do take note. Personally, I'm a huge fan of this humanistic approach. It has definitely made me feel much more comfortable and much more welcome in any workspace that I have been a part of. Now, it does look like we don't have any questions in the chat. So if anything comes up, do write it now. But Ben, thank you so much for joining. It's been an absolute delight to have you here today. I feel like I've gained a lot of understanding and insight into how to be a good leader that builds high performance and value driven culture. So again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the perspective and the experience that you have brought to this webinar.
Well, thank you. Thank you for inviting me, Manana, and hopefully it's been useful to some. Thank you very much indeed.
It's been a pleasure. Have a wonderful day and see you around.